Greetings, everyone, to East meets West at the Vice. Today, the 24th of April, Eric, Austin, and Al Beatty are going to be looking at the Duns, a no hackle dun and a quill body comparadun. I'm Al Beatty, and let me add my good buddy Eric Austin in here on a side-by-side. Eric, what are you going to start out with today?
Well, I've got the no hackle done, and these will be both of ours. I think will be good flat water flies, slower water, very discerning fish. The original no hackle was a Swisher-Richards, featured in their book Selective Trout in I think '74. I consider it the best flat water dun pattern there is. As far as if you've tried everything else, this many times will work where other flies fail. It is difficult to fish. It's even more difficult, I think, to tie. I'll show you some examples here so we won't be stuck with whatever I come up with today. These are flies I've done in the past, and this is a side view. I like a really upright wing. The original Swisher-Richards was more sidewinder style, but Renee Harrop and Mike Lawson both took the fly and made it a bit more upright. Here's one I've tied this week that has hackle in the tail, and this is a single wing one. And then I'll show you one more here. This is a double wing one I did this week with microfibbits in the tail. I personally, and this is going to sound like sacrilege, but I personally prefer microfibbits on this fly. In my head, it floats the fly a little better. Now, a lot of guys don't like microfibbits. They don't feel that the fish catching abilities are as good. I don't know. I've caught a lot of fish with this fly with microfibbits, and I'll be using microfibbits today. But they can be done with hackle. Renee Harrop does his with hackle, as does Mike Lawson, and they're the two best that I know of. I guess Renee's not tying anymore, but I think Mike Lawson might still be. And the flies in their shops, the no hackles are exquisite. So let me get going here. This is, I wanted to show you one. I should show you the recipe. I wanted to talk a little bit about it. Dry fly, any dry fly hook. For a PMD, which is what I'm going to do today, 16 to 18, sulfurs could be anywhere from 12 to 18. I've seen some nice green drake no hackles done. And obviously they're much larger. The Eastern green drake is at 8 to 10. I like uni 8/0 thread for this. For whatever reason, for me anyway, it works better. I've tried Benecki, I've tried a lot of threads, and I keep coming back to uni 8/0. Renee Harrop uses uni 8/0 as well. And then the tail, dun hackle or coq de leon or microfibbits like I'm going to use today. Wings, slips, 2 slips, one from a right and one from a left mallard quill. And the dubbing is PMD. Mike Lawson uses Superfine, which I'm going to use today. Renee Harrop uses a bulkier dubbing, his professional line of dubbing. But any PMD dubbing should be fine. It's just how you use it, how you put it on. And now I'll get going. I'm just going to leave a very small space up front on this one. I'll leave the thread tag long because I like to get a big split on my tails. And I have a technique to do that, which I'm sure just about everybody here has seen already, but we'll do it again anyway. I'm making a thread bump with X wraps at the back. And I want it to be fairly substantial. Again, with the split in mind. Microfibbits, I use 4. Typically Hackle, I'll use 6. And it doesn't have to be dead exact. It's sometimes hard to get them to get exactly 4, exactly 6. Just come as close to that as you can. Now on this Swisher-Richards style no hackle, you don't want a long tail. Normally I like long tails, but on this fly, it's problematical. It'll get caught up in the wings and the dubbing as you wind it later. And the ones I've seen out in Last Chance all have pretty short tails. This one I had 5. I've taken this down. I want these near tails to angle down so that as I wrap back, I'm going to shorten this up just a little bit. So that as I wrap back, they'll come up, and I only have to worry then about the far tails. And I'll hold them in place, making sure they don't get they don't go down from thread torque, sort of holding them up and in place. Now these near tails didn't come up as well as I'd like. I'm going to bring them up just a little bit. And side to side pressure back as I get back towards the bump. And I get a pretty nice spread. These are still low. Let me try one more time to get them up. Normally the thread torque will bring them right up, but naturally, since we're live here, it's not going to happen. Close enough. We'll go with that. Go all the way to the front again. Back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 turns on this hook, which is actually a size 13, believe it or not. This is a Tiemco TMC 102Y, and I'm using it because I'm pretty much out of 14s. Tiemco, I've just ordered 100 more. All right, I've got slips here taken from a left mallard quill, longest fibers on the left, and a right mallard quill, longest fibers on the right as you look at it from the front in its upright position. You're going to want to use fibers from the middle third of the feather. So you want one from each side, and then you put them back to back. Let me show you the width. It should be somewhere between. I like to gauge it to the shank. It's a little easier than trying to gauge it to the gap, and the gap changes. This hook has a wide gap. This is about. I like it somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4, and this is about. It's a little over 3/4. It's a pretty beefy wing. I don't mind a wide wing, but and it's a big butt. Let me show you this before I get into the width. If it's too wide, and this might be, that can be a problem. What'll happen is, because these are slippery, the thing will roll with too wide a wing. So we'll see how we come out. Taking a couple of taps back on the far side of the vise, a couple of taps back on the near side of the vise, crimping the front of this, and then a couple of, and these are very light taps. I do 3 sets. What these are extremely horizontal wraps around the butts. And then I'll take 4 vertical wraps, forcing the tips forward. Oops. Don't like this. I want these more together. What I'm looking for here is I want to make sure this far wing has not rolled under the shank. If that happens, it's death. And it didn't happen here, so that's encouraging. Now you'll find that these wings split as you put them on, and under a lot of circumstances you can marry them back. Sometimes you can't. We'll see. Take these butts now and twist them. Twist them up. You see how this wants to roll my way? I don't consider that a huge problem, but I'm going to take some more turns. Starting from just behind the eye, take a turn underneath the near wing. And then another turn just behind the eye. Hold the far wing up and in place and take a turn underneath it. And don't be too aggressive with this turn. A lot of the success or failure of this fly has to do with thread tension. You're hardly ever using very hard wraps. Where the wings are concerned, certainly. These near tails will be the death of me. I'm going to back off a couple of turns, and I'm going to do some dubbing. By the way I'm showing this fly is exactly the way, maybe not with the level of success they have, but the same, pretty much exactly the same techniques that Mike Lawson and Renee Harrop use. I've got both their videos, and I'm gonna put this dubbing on counterclockwise, by the way. so 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 sue me. And that I'll show you why in a sec. I always do a nod to Renee Harrop with this fly, and I go like this. I tighten it up after the fact and with my left hand, it's strongest in the counterclockwise direction. So that's why I'm doing counterclockwise here. I want this dubbing to be pretty tight. If I'm really concerned about floatability, I'll use Renee Harrop's dubbing, which is bulkier, traps air, and I get a little bit better flotation with it in my head. Now, your mileage may well vary. And like I said, Mike Lawson does his with Superfine. So what do I know? Yeah. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. However, on this fly, doing things in this order, this direction, this way, in my mind, is correct. I think it's Davey McPhail does a version of this where he doesn't do any of the Harrop conventions, or Mike Lawson. He doesn't tie it like either one of them, and it comes out fine, of course, because he's Davey McPhail. So, but this to me is the method. I got these special tiny scissors for just doing this.
Eric, that is gorgeous.
Oh, well, thanks, Al.
Looks good.
Well, um, I always tie just one fly, but I thought if anybody would like to see it, I might try a double wing version of this today. I've only
That's a good idea.
all right. The only double wings I've ever seen of this, and I've never seen one in person, were in a book. And I don't know if it was Harrop's book or if it was John McDaniel's book. Somebody had a book, and there were some Renee Harrop's versions of No Hackles that were just astounding. They had double wings. Well, I do a crude double wing version. It's pretty much just like the single, but double wing, so twice as hard. I don't know. It's not twice as hard by any stretch, but I won't do as much exposition on this. I'll just get tying. I hope I've got 4 here. Let's see. Yep. If they don't roll up for you, you can always make them roll up. See if I can get this near wing to come up on this one. It's what's happened is it's trapped under the thread bump. All right. There we go. Good split again. All right, I've got a pair of wings pre-made here. What I've done is I've glued the bottom ends, just the very ends. I haven't glued these together. As you can see, they're very much separated, but the bases, the very bottom is glued. Now that gets cut off, so there won't be any glue on these wings at all, but it just keeps these things together while you're trying to mount them, which is important. By the way, I've taken these slips from the bottom third of the feather, which are normally not very useful, but with the double wing, they are. These are fairly wide again, good 3/4 of the shank. Just let the, you want to get the eye just peeking out. Now, because these are doubled, they really want to roll, let me tell you. And what I've done with these is just after the fact, I straighten them up and take some more turns. Always being mindful not to pull the far wing underneath the hook. As you can see, these really these it's a lot of feather here. Okay. Try going under the near wings first. Okay. Now, there's not a lot of room here for me to just to dub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lower edges of these wings and push them forward to get them out of the way. You got to be careful. It's just about anything you do on this fly will mess up the far wing. I spend all of my energy trying to avoid the far wing. Okay. Dubbing wax. Oops. Zoom out so you can see the dubbing. Using just the tiniest amount imaginable that I can get on there safely. Now, when you're winding this dubbing, the whole goal here is you desperately want to avoid the wings as you wind. In order to do that, you kind of wind parallel to the backs of the wings. And you'll find you can still get into that far wing. Like right there, it really wants to get into there. And you're trying to force this dubbing forward always. But if the far wing starts to move too much, you're done. That's as far forward as you're going to safely go. For some reason, the near wing is rarely a problem. Always, we need a really robust thorax on this fly to help float it. And, you know, the insects have robust thoraxes, so there's that. Oops, sorry.
Another beautiful fly, Eric.
So there you go. There's the double wing. And to be honest, I've never fished a double wing, but it would be fun. And I would imagine it'd float really well. And it might hold up a little better. I don't know. But anyway, the only place I've ever seen it other than this is in books.
I think so.
So that's it for me. Any questions?
I have a question, Eric.
Yeah.
So when in our Atlantic Guild meeting, our president was tying a fly and he was using wood duck for the tail, over the tail. And what he did is he actually tied a double surgeon's loop and tied those off. Racus was still on. As you know, you got to leave Racus on wood duck when you're doing that. Otherwise, it'll just come apart. But he actually tied that so he crimped down the fibers as if you were doing a married wing installation on each of those. So when you tied them in, they were already gathered together. And you tied them in at that gather point where the thread was. Could you think you could do that with that wing, with those wings? So they were compressed before you actually tied them onto the hook.
Yeah, I think there was a version of that Paul Jorgensen used to do with the mallard roof, as I recall, in his book.
Oh, okay.
He would, and I've tried to do that, and it never worked for me. Is all I can tell you. That's a me problem. It worked fine for Paul Jorgensen, but anyway, that's one of the mallard roof techniques that I know about that I've never been able to do successfully. So sure, I would imagine it's doable.
Okay.
I personally wouldn't know how to do it. So
okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Great job, though. That's a tough thing to tie those wings, and I already know that just watching it.
Eric,
yeah.
you know, I've got that book from Art Flick's Master Fly Tying Guide, and it's got a chapter on Swisher-Richards patterns. And he does the fly that you just tied, but he ties the body first and then the wing. And I didn't know if you had tried it that way. I like
I've tried it that way.
the outcome of yours better.
I've tried it that way. For me again, and I was able to do it, and I did them that way for a while, but I don't know. I like this way better. I didn't realize I have selective trout, and I didn't realize that they tied the body and then the wings.
Well,
Swisher-Richards.
Yeah, what they did is they do a couple different ties, and then the last section they get to they just do the mounting of the wings, and they start off with number 1, but there's no body on the diagrams. It's just the wings, period. No tailor.
Gotcha.
And they show you the position to put the stuff, you know, and they got the wing, and like you were doing with the thread. And but I think part of the reason that you have fun when you're doing it with going with that body up the front wing, okay, and then when you try to do that back wing coming down, your thread is going against those fibers.
Yeah.
And you're liable to catch them.
Yes.
When
yes.
you're going on the front wing, you're kind of just stroking those wing fibers up like they normally would be.
You know, what I did for a while is I actually did a thread reversal. You know how you go underneath the near wing with the thread? And once they're sort of mounted, you go underneath the near wing with the thread. And then you go underneath the far wing. Well, I decided that the problem with the far wing was it wasn't really like the near wing. So I would do a thread reversal and go under the far wing, bringing it up just like you bring up the near wing. And in theory, it was great. In practice, it's easier to do it the way Harrop does it. You know, it just is. And I stopped doing that finally, because theoretically it was great, and I got good results, but I got just as good results doing it the easier way, not having to pull out a length of thread and go over it and reverse the thread and so forth. So,
well, your wings look great, and they actually look better than the ones in this book I have.
Well,
They
that's
get that wide shape to them, and that he calls that the sidewinder style.
yeah.
But it's
I always called it the Dumbo ears effect, where you want these wings to have a cup to
Yeah.
them, and that's the way Harrop's always were, and Mike Lawson's both. I mean, both those guys are incredible. And year after year, I'd go out to Henry's Fork with my no hackles, and I'd compare it to theirs. And year after year, it was like, no, not this year. Nope, not this year. But I love the way they do them. That's for sure. But I've spent a lot of many happy hours, and I don't know. I would guess 25 pairs of wings, 30 pairs of wings at least over time. At least maybe 50 pairs of wings over time, trying to learn this fly. It's tough, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Jim.
Eric, do you always, or is it typical to use the same width and length on the second wing? You used identical length and width.
I used identical length and width. Obviously, you don't have to, and there have been times, the far wing is always the struggle, and I've done things like make the far wing a little wider to start with. Sometimes that seemed like it was a good idea. I've always made them the same height, but now I just even them up and myself. I don't cheat that way. One way I will cheat though on these wings is if I'm trying to do big wide ones, especially like on a green drake. Let's say you're doing a green drake. That's a tough one to do because the wings have to be so wide, and so you get a ton of bulk, and everything wants to flip around. So I will angle the feathers towards myself and tie them in so that the thread torque doesn't really make them roll, because they want to roll big time. The wider you get these wings, the more they want to roll away from you. So I'll do that. That's one cheat I do if I'm tying pretty big ones.
We don't call it cheating. We call it
It's technique.
technique.
Yeah.
It's a workaround, Eric. It's a workaround.
Great job, Eric. That's the first time I've seen the double wing tied.
Thank you. Thanks.
Eric always does a good job on those. Leaves me in awe. Any
Oh, I
more
appreciate
questions
it,
for Eric
guys.
before we
Thank
change
you.
over? Okay, well, I'm going to take off then with a Western version, and we may as well just take a quick look at the fly itself that we'll be tying. It's a hair wing dun. With a quill body, and I'm going to use a moose tail. But this, like a lot of flies, is a concept fly that can be any color, any size, any combinations thereof. But let's start out with the recipe. And we've got a dry flies, and again, sizes 8 to 22. This thing can be tied for a wide range. I'm using brown thread today. Moose in a split tail. The rib is optional. I'm doing a stripped quill, so I won't be putting wire over it. The wing is deer or elk. Thorax is going to be dubbing or peacock or whatever you want, but I'm going to be using peacock. And the head will be thread. Taking a quick look at the materials, there they are. And you can see there's some Antron body wool there, and I may show you a simpler version if time allows as we move into this. But moving back to the vise, I'll just set this sample fly out of the way, the road map fly. put a hook in the vise. Tying a size 12 right now, but it can be, it's an awful large one and would tend more towards the Drake side of things. The flies that I tie commercially for this start at 14s and go down to 20s. Once in a while, I'll do some 22s, but the 22s are getting tougher to do all the time. Now, let me reach over here to the materials and grab myself a couple of things. I've got thread, and I may as well get that out of the way. Get the tail hair around. And let's get back over here and we'll just put some thread on the hook. And I'm going to start back about 1/3 on the hook shank from the hook eye. And that will be the front edge of my wing, or that will be the edge where I place my wing. And I'm just going to wrap to the back. And I'm going to need a ball of thread there, just like Eric did. I do it slightly different, but the truth of the matter is you just need a ball of something there. A lot of people use a ball of dubbing. And then I come forward like this and tie it off. Because I don't know how Eric does it. I'm in awe, but the thread ball that I put there, invariably I get some strands that come off that darn thing, and it ends up being a wad of thread, unless I lash it down like I just did there. So let's just go forward now. This is one of the few flies I almost always tie all my flies with the wing first, or excuse me, the tail first. This is one of the few that I do a wing, and it's because I can tell you, I can do split tails just fine. I put on a split tail, then I go to put on the wing, and I mess it up every single time. And then I spend more time straightening up the split tail that was perfect until I messed it up. So anyway, back to the materials area. Let's get a little bit of mousse here, or a little bit of I tie the tails on so much I'm having a hard time making myself go to the wing material first. Let me just get some of the hair here. Was there a question? Okay. Now I got to get rid of the waist, and I'm just going to grab the hair here by the tips, and we'll just move out over the waste bin and get rid of that before I come back to the vise. That way I won't have that crud getting all over the camera. And one of the things about tying on Zoom, you have your studio equipment to deal with along with all the others. But now this bundle of hair is all nicely cleaned. It had a lot of fuzz in here and short fibers and stuff. And now I'm just down to the longer set of fibers there. We'll put that in the stacker, and even the hair in the stacker, and pull the fibers out so that they're pointing in the direction that they're going to go on the hook. Now I've got just a little bit more than I need there, so I'm just going to strip some of these out, probably 6 or 8, and get rid of them. And I can see I got one short one on the other side, and I got rid of it. So now let's get down here, measure our wing for length. I like it to be about the shank. And I'll just set that in place and then really cinch down. Now I'm going to trim the waist, and this is where I would mess my tail up. They're trimming the waist and trying to get a nice taper to that. Invariably, my scissors get in there, I clip something, or I bump it with my fingers, and anyway, I end up with a mess. So I am going to trim at a very severe angle so that I get a nice taper to my underbody. And I want to wrap my thread over those trimmed ends, and I'll just put my fingers together right there and allow my trigger finger here on the other side to just kind of guide that thread so that I don't get what I call stickies, which is just fiber sticking up through the wrapped thread. There we go. Got that all right. Now I'm going to stand up my wing. And one of the things about these wings, I often see people stand up their hair wings by just wrapping a big ball of thread in front. And they're standing up good for a while. But after you've had them in the fly box for a while, you'll come along and you'll find your wings are all tilted forward like that. They'll fish just fine. But the truth of the matter is there's an easy way to make them stand up. And that is to don't attack the bundle all at once. Just, I'm going to do it in about fourths. I'll start with the first fourth and put a cinch in there. And now you can see that bunch is going to stay right there, just like the way you want them. Now we'll go to the next batch. And that one's going to stay there. And one more. And now when we wrap that ball of thread in front, it's only holding up the last quarter. So it's not quite such a... Now, one of the things where I can often run into trouble, and other fly tyers do as well. Let me wrap back here to the back of the hill, if you will, right here. Is right now I'm in good shape, but all too often some of these strands will get crossed under the hook and just cause me fits. Fish don't care, but I do. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to anchor my thread back at the base of the hill here, pull forward, and just anchor that thread in place. Now the thread's going to want to slip. There we go. I got it just right. Got lucky that time. And I only messed up two fibers, and I'll get rid of them. So now we've got the wing sitting there. What you never do with a Comparadun, they're a fanned wing. You don't want to fan the wing until you've got everything else in place, because that wing, I guarantee, is just going to get in your way, and you're going to snag the fibers of the wing, and it's going to end up in other parts of the body. Now let's get back over to the materials again. And this time I'm going to just grab a very few fibers of moose body hair. Probably more than I need, but I'll get rid of all the short ones, and I'll just want the longer ones. And these, I can get rid of the waste, the fuzz and everything. It doesn't have very much. I'll just give it a one pull and it's gone. And I'll just slide these into the stacker to get them all stacked. Okay. Now I want 4 fibers, but the truth of the matter is, you see there's a whole bunch of different sized ones there. Let's get rid of the short ones first, so we're working with all about the same thing. There we go. Now I'll just get down to that looks like about 4 fibers, and if it's 5, I'll cut one out, or I can just leave it there. Now I want to measure them for length. I want them to be about as long as the shank, and I'll just get them tied in on right there up on top of the hook. Working my way towards the back, and now we're getting back towards that bump. So let's see if we can't just separate them a little bit. And as I wrap towards the back, I'm going to grab the near side. And I'm using what I call snug, not anchor, not tight anchor wraps, but I'm using snug holding wraps. And this one right here isn't wanting to stay together too good. Well, I'll see if I can correct its attitude. See if that helps it any. Nope, it didn't. So let's go the other direction. There, that pulled it together. And now they're just the way I want them. Now I'll trim off this extra, and I want to make sure that I pull this forward so that the trimmed hair ends are trimmed off right towards the top of that hill, so that I can blend that all together and have a nice smooth underbody. And I found if you have a smooth underbody, the outer body looks good. And on this one, we're going to be doing quills. So that's makes a nice smooth base on which to wrap them. It's really tough to get a good quill body if you've got a bumpy, lumpy underbody. But let me get back over here. And we are going to be using peacock for everything. And so I am just going to pull off a peacock, and I'll show you what I do over here at the vise. And what I do is I take my I think Jim calls that the long finger, whatever it is, And I just take that fingernail at an angle just about like that, up against my thumb, and I broke it. So I'll just get another one. I won't bother taking the camera back over, but we'll get into this area. I'll get a heavier one. There we go. Now that takes it pretty well off of one side. And the other side. Now when it doesn't really want to clean up, there's a thing called an eraser. And you can see this eraser has been well used for a bunch of different things, but that works pretty good too. And the one thing that I just can't demonstrate worth a darn in front of a camera is one that really works well is to place it on my pant leg, and that's how I usually erase it, with an eraser. But anyway, you get the idea. I stripped the little barbules off of that quill there. And let's just go ahead now and take one of the prepared ones that I've got here and tie it on the hook. And we'll just wrap, getting it to the back. And as I wrap, I pull that down so it's on the bottom. And I'll just wrap forward a bit and then start wrapping that quill forward. Notice that I tied that quill in by its tip. I do that often now. In this size 12, it's going to be a struggle to get it to work out. But when you're tying a 16, 18, and a 20, that makes for a beautifully tapered quill body, because the quill is also narrower towards the tip than it is towards the base end. Anyway, let's move back over to the materials area, and I'll grab several of these fibers off of this right here. Need to get I'll grab about 3 hurls. Take them back to the vise, and I'll just trim off the curlies and some of the stem, because I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but the distribution of the barbs along that stem. Yeah, let me stop for a second. I know I'm supposed to call it a rachis. My mom called it a stem, and I didn't even hear the word rachis until I was about 70 years old. So I'm sorry, I'm stuck with a habit, and that's just the way it is. But anyway, right along here, it starts to get a lot thicker, but right down here in this area, they're pretty thin. Well, we don't want that as part of our thorax, so we'll just, I didn't do a good job of trimming that. Let me do that again. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to use a Bachman method of keeping that body nice and tight. Dutch showed that to us here a while back, and I really liked it a lot. He uses the thread. You see how that thread is just hanging there and keeping each turn of peacock nice and tight against the previous. Okay, looking good. Now I'm going to take a couple of turns right there, and I'll just take a wrap or two here, and we'll tie this off. And there we go. And we'll put a half hitch on there. And that half hitch tool can be used to push some of the fibers that are trying to get into your head back. That's a little trick that I learned from Jan Abben from the Netherlands, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other people that do the same thing. But anyway, I'm slipping a whip finish in there now using the half hitch tool. It'll make a whip finish if you allow it to collapse over the original strand. If you don't, you'll end up with a 2-turn jam knot, or whatever it's called. And let's get rid of these fibers right here. And now the last thing we want to do is fan out that fan wing. And there you got a fan wing, quill body comparadun. Questions?
I thought that was incredible. Something occurred to me, Al, while you were doing that.
Yes.
Well, first of all, you had a really long, good piece of peacock herl. That's what it looked like to me, anyway. And if you did have a good long piece, and you wanted, I was thinking you could strip out, half of it, and then just wrap the whole thing. In other words, leave part of it fuzzy. Have you ever done that?
Oh, I do it all the time. In fact, we got a whole set. Well, as an example, one of the flies that we tied, just gobs of them, were H&L variants, which is and the body is half the stripped quill and half regular. And what we do is we strip all of them with bleach. And then we soak, you put the butt ends in the bleach and burn off about half of the fibers on the shaft and then stop the bleach process and
So you use baking soda
then
for
put it
that?
in. Well, I'm sorry.
You use baking soda for that to stop
To
the bleach
stop it.
process?
No, we just wash them and then before we use them, they can be a little bit brittle. You put glue on the hook and then you soak the stem in some water before you
Gotcha.
wrap it.
But you've left the hurl on part of it, and
Yeah, the hurl is
just
on the
use
other
that,
end,
yeah.
and it's the full end too, which is the one you're wrapping.
Cool. Yeah, cool fly.
Any questions? No questions?
So continuing with what you just said, is that so? I got confused about the far end. So you're tying it in by the tip, and
I did.
that's stripped. And as you come forward, you're going to have a little bit of hurl as you come forward, as you're winding it on. So the hurly part is further forward, almost like a thorax, or no?
No. When you're doing the stripped, when you're doing half stripped and half not stripped, you burn off or you take the fibers off the butt end, and one of the flies, and there's several flies, but the one that comes to mind right now is the H&L variant, and that's tied in by the butt end, stripped quills, and the back half of the body is a stripped peacock hurl body, and then you just keep wrapping forward with the hurl that's left on the other end of the shaft. Okay, well, I wanted to show you a different technique for putting on that wing. I'm not going to tie the whole fly. I'm just going to do a wing for you, and I'll tell you the story that goes with it. There's a absolutely phenomenal salmon fly tyer named Marvin Nolte. He's one of the two only people that I know personally that make their living tying full dress Atlantic salmon flies. The other guy is in Norway. But anyway, Marvin Nolte and I would fish the Bighorn River every September for the black caddis hatch. Well, one year we got there and the black caddis hadn't started yet, and so we were fishing some comparaduns for the mayflies that were on the water, and there was a scattering of different stuff. And I was doing real good, I was catching 6-8 fish along in an hour, and Marvin was catching one about every 5 minutes, or it was into one and didn't get broke off. I said, "Fine, what are you doing, Marvin?" He says, "Well, I can't tie those hair wing ones like you do, so I do them out of something else, but they look the same." I'm going to show you. Let's get back over here let's get over here to the materials area. We're going to use the Lure Flash Antron body wool, and you can do a search on the internet. It's all over the place. It's no big deal to get it. It's a UK product, or at least it used to be, but it's available here in the States. Anyway, I'm just going to cut off a piece of that, take it over to my vise, and we'll switch over. And now, well, I've got this. I'll just set that aside for the moment. take this, get a hook. What Marvin was doing is he was getting just a little bit of flash in his flies that my hair wing ones didn't have. Whoops, I messed that one up. I cut too much and I cut part of it in behind. So I'm just going to do that all over again. And this time I'll tie it in the back instead of the front. Again, you trim it at a severe angle so that you can taper the underbody into the tails. And we'll come forward. Now I'm going to try not to cut my wing when I trim out the waist here. Got lucky. And there you've got, I've always chuckled about it, but I've called that the Nolte wing forever. And there's a really simple to tie, just effective as heck, Comparadun wing. Any questions on that one? Or you can say you learned it from Marvin Nolte. And by the way, he lives in Bar None, Wyoming. And Bar None, Wyoming was built on an old Air Force base. And the streets are about 100 yards wide. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but they've got to be at least, I don't know, 50 yards wide. You go to the main street that Marvin lives on, they finally came along and planted a strip of grass down the middle of it. But there's all these houses on one side, and 50 yards across the way, that's the other side of the street. It's quite an experience just going to visit Marvin. But anyhow, that's not the story that we were talking about. There's a real simple wing for you if you want to catch fish just as well as you do with the hair wings. That'll do it.
It's a great fly, Al.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you use the Puglisi trigger point stuff instead of the Antron wool?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with that product. I've
Okay.
used the Antron wools for 30 years, and it just I have every confidence that anything else would work. I've tied them with poly yarn, and though you don't want to use a full strand of poly yarn, it works really well too. But it doesn't have that little glint to it that that Antron wing does.
I think the Puglisi stuff would work fine for that. I've used some of that stuff for saltwater flies, which it's well suited to. But I've thought many times about using it for winging material. I've never done it, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, we don't seem to be having any more questions or comments or anything there. Eric, what do you think we ought to do next week?
Oh boy. I was trying
Or
to get
should we
through
be
this
winding
week,
this
Al.
up? I'm sorry, what?
I was trying to get through this week
Well,
successfully.
we could always call it the end of the season and go for the next one, but whatever you want to do, or we can communicate on email, and I won't put you under the gun with all the lights on and everybody watching.
Well, yeah, I was thinking of something earlier today, and now it's gone, of course.
Tell me about it. I go from one room to the other and can't remember why I went to the next room. So,
well, we'll come up with something.
Yeah,
I know what I was thinking of. I was thinking of, and I think you've already done a caddis, but I haven't. I was thinking of maybe doing a caddis, and in the East meets West format, I was thinking of doing the Hemingway, which is like the Henryville, which is the eastern fly.
sure.
But the Hemingway was Mike Lawson took that and tailored it to what he was seeing on Henry's Fork. So I was thinking I could do that. That's a good east meets west idea. Both are
And-
involved with that one.
On the western side of things, I'm going to do something people probably haven't seen much of before. I'm going to do a wonder wing caddis.
Oh, I've never seen
So-
one of those.
Oh, it's because it's one of my patterns, and then
Oh,
we come up with things, and every now and then I came up with a muddle May. It became a pretty popular fly. A lot of people liked it. I came up with a wonder wing caddis, and I couldn't sell 3 of them. I mean, so there was just no way I could get rid of them. But anyway, I'll do a wonder wing caddis, and you can see if on round 2 whether it's any good. Okay, that's if I get this written down, I probably won't forget it.
yeah. And Al, I was just thinking about that. I at one point wanted to do a really accurate mayfly pattern, almost realistic. And I was enamored of wally wings at the time. And I came up with this fly that on the water looked exactly like a mayfly. I mean, it was, I used that technique where you take a single feather and you cut the tip out of it, and then you strip out some of the rest, and you get 2 tails that
Hatchmaster.
angle up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I used that on it, and I had the wally wings going, and it was hard to tie, of course, but I took it out on a local stream in Ohio, which doesn't have trout, and just watched it. And they're like, this is the greatest pattern ever, okay, in my mind. And then I took it to Molesnik Spring Creek, which is one of the toughest fisheries I've ever fished in Montana. And I would throw that thing.
Eric, you're muted. You're muted. Eric.
I would throw that fly out, and it looked great, and I would get hit after hit after hit from these big fish on Molesniks, and I couldn't hook a single one. And I gave it to my friend Bruce. Same thing. They loved it. It was killer, but I couldn't hook a fish with it. I'll show that next time. I'll show that fly. It's a cool looking
I'd
fly.
love to see it. I'd love to see it, because we got to figure
but
out
don't go
somehow
there.
or another something was blocking the
Yeah,
the hooking ability. Maybe we can come up with a solution to it now, many years later.
yeah, I would love it. Yeah, it's in fact, I think that fly may still be on Hans Velleman's site. I sent one to him before I had failed miserably with the fly. But anyway, that's fly design.
Does it have things sticking out the very front of it?
No, it really doesn't. I mean, the wings are angled back. Well,
Yeah,
I'll show it next week, and we can all just ridicule it.
Okay.
So Al,
Well,
you
if
might
there-
consider tying the Nelson caddis as another idea for the West. That's the one we tied with the multiple bits of deer hair, but he leaves them unclipped. It's not like a Goddard caddis.
Yeah, it's
You know that.
I know it. I tied him with 3 bundles and 2 bundles.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the
Yeah,
fly. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it very well. It's all it is a bunch of miniature elk hair caddises all stacked on the same hook. Anyway, if there's nothing else, we shall unspotlight us both and chat with you all for a few minutes. And if there's anybody out, hey Dutch, I didn't see you come in. Welcome.
Hey, Al, good to see y'all. Hey,
Yep.
a nice Western alternative to a caddis is a spruce moth.
Hmm.
It has very much the kind of similar profile to the Nolte fly you just dressed, but it's a good alternative to a caddis because the wing configuration is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
You talking dries, all you guys are talking dries, I have to assume, right?
Uh,
Spruce
I haven't tied that particular pattern that Dutch is talking about. Just as for some reason I haven't had to do it. So
familiar with the old spruce fly. I mean,
oh yeah.
you know that I'll tell you
This
who
is-
does an incredible spruce fly is Dick Shaw, my friend Dick
Oh.
Shaw here.
Are you
his-
signing are you signing him up for maybe a 3-way
I
coming up
don't,
real
I don't,
soon?
I would love to, but I don't think Dick will do it. He doesn't like the limelight. I don't know, Dick. What do you think? Would you be up for tying a streamer for us? I mean,
I, I don't mind tying, I just don't have the equipment to video it.
you got an iPhone, right?
Yeah, that I do.
I don't know, Al. Could we fix Dick up at all?
He lives too far away, or I'd drive over there and set one up for him. But
Well,
because I think
Yeah,
he lives east of Mississippi, doesn't he?
yeah, oh yeah, he's
Oh, yeah.
in Dublin, Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Dick, I got to say that Dick is the finest streamer tire I've ever seen. He ties these really small size streamers, which look to me, especially as some of his, like the spruce, Edson Tiger, those sorts of things that have a stripe down. You know, it looks like it's supposed to look like a minnow. Well, boy, Dicks do. They look like little minnows. They're amazing. So
Yeah, I always kind of like to tie little feather wing streamers down to even a size 12. Hook
Well,
there,
Dick,
more
Dick,
than
if we-
about an inch and a quarter long.
if we can't work out having you tie one, maybe you could send me some shots of some of your stuff that I could show the guys here.
Could probably do that.
'Cause,
Hey, maybe we could try. Here's what we could do. If Dick, we could put Dick on a 3-way. He doesn't have to tie him. He can kind of explain to us what we're doing wrong as we tie him.
You never gonna do that. No way. Well, you remember I'm up on the El Saba all next week, so.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Anyway, the streamers. I definitely want to do some streamers. I've
Yeah.
tied a ton of streamers. I love to fish streamers, and I don't think we've tied any streamers this year, have we?
No, I haven't. I don't even think the only streamers I've ever tied in, even on YouTube, for instance, have been Carrie Stevens stuff, you know.
Right. Is that what you're talking about?
some of
Or
the-
different?
No, well, Dick ties great Carrie Stevens stuff, but no, we're talking, I don't know if you remember the light and dark Edson Tiger, at J. Edson Leonard's flies, or, well, the black nose dace would be an example,
Mhm.
you know, although it's not a feather wing. But Dick
I'll tell you what.
has a mastery of the feather wings. And these
I,
are, you know, the 9.3 and, you know, flies like that from the 60s. Many of them.
I love the Full Sure Thunder Creek series too. I've fished a ton
Oh,
of those
yeah, yeah.
with a lot of
And
success.
I've tied a ton of those myself.
Yeah,
Um,
me too. Unfortunately, most people overdress that fly.
Yeah. I would let you do that one. I'd do one of yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be fun for I would try you know, I've got to see what kind of feathers I have here that would lend themselves to a featherwing streamer. But you know, the Roxy Roach was one. I've got Bates streamer book that's got all these old streamers, and I've tied a bunch of them in the past, of course, but I'd love to do a featherwing streamer at some point.
I've got to do something here. If you please keep talking, but I am going to spotlight Dutch because he's got something up there that I can't tell what it is, but I got to see it.
All right. Oh yeah.
Whoa!
Whoa.
Now there's a screamer. Boy, I like that. That's when you float the Yellowstone in the fall, pounding the banks with that guy. You just hit the bank, strip, 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 hit the bank again, strip, strip, strip. Oh boy, do I love that. That is a great fly.
Now, I'll tell you how I got to this point. I was watching the Sculpzilla, and I was looking at the Johnson Creek leech, and I thought, well, I had something in mind very similar. And so this pattern is tied on a Gamakatsu B10S, and it actually rides hook point up. But from the start of the bend, 10 wire wraps toward the eye. The body is polar chenille or the Vivus body fuzz. The tail is a rabbit strip, but it's a new hairline product called Shimmer. And you'll notice what they've done is take normal rabbit strip and they've made the tips of it like a golden tinsel. And in the water, it's just spectacular.
That is stunning.
This is one that goes, the leather pad goes over the hook. So you've got about 3/8 or a ½ inch forward that covers that wire. And then there is a red or orange guinea hackle. And the hackle you see on top here is actually a woven hair hackle made out of gemsbok.
You also have some, looks like crazy legs in there or something.
Yeah. Thank you. I forgot that. Yes. After the wire, the rear set of rubber legs, and they're perfect brand rubber legs. The rear set is tied in about midway on that wire wrap. And I like to tie them in so you wrap the rubber leg around the thread, lift the thread up and lower the rubber leg to the hook shank and begin wrapping. That way, the first 2 wraps go over the head of that rubber leg and there's no bump. And that you can wrap toward the end, toward the bend, and then you go forward and wrap in 2 more at the forward part of that wire at about the first wrap, and it's configured exactly the same way. And then the rabbit strip goes on top of that, and then the guinea hackle, and then the woven hair hackle. But I'll tell you what, this thing in the water is spectacular.
You know, that'd be a hell of a brown trout bug, you know, like I said, for pounding the banks. That'd also be a heck of a good bass bug.
Well, Al, what I was thinking on this is actually exactly what you said. The rivers I fished in Montana have a lot of sculpin. And and when this gets wet, the woven hair hackle stands out and wiggles, but the rest of it becomes that cigar shape. Like a bait fish sculpin. But I tried it on some local largemouth bass, and they were very fond of it.
I can't imagine why. Oh God.
Yeah, that thing looks like it'd go nuts in the water.
It does. Eric, it's crazy. It almost plays a tune. I mean, it's really something.
Hey, before we get signed off here, guys, let me get my wrap in here so I've got something to put on the end of the video. Spotlight for everyone. That's it for this week, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you.